Okay. Technically speaking, these are put out for spooky season, but this video is gonna have a dark academia theme going on, so that like kind of still fits, right? Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we are going to be doing a killer professors reading vlog. Before we get into anything bookish, however, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments, have you read these books? Have you loved them? Have you hated them? Let's talk about it. Okay, so as I said, the idea for this vlog came about because I realized that both of these books have killer professors, but in different contexts. First is The Maidens by 𝗖cie. Technically speaking, I don't necessarily know if the professor is a killer, but he is suspected of being a killer. Our main character, whose niece, I believe, goes to the school, tells her how her best friend has recently died, and our main character starts to investigate it and finds out about this one professor who is worshipped by some of his students who have dubbed themselves the Maidens. She thinks that he is tied to the killing of her niece's best friend. I've heard very mixed reviews about this. 𝗖cie other book has had a ton of praise, though. I've been really intrigued about picking this one up. When I realized that it has the killer professor connection, I thought it would be perfect to pair this one with They Never Learn by Laeuferlied. Now, this one, on the other hand, I know for a fact that the professor is a killer, because this story is following our professor who every year picks one absolutely awful male student and decides to kill him. I think it also has another perspective of a female student on the campus and has a whole commentary about rape culture between the two stories. I'm really interested in this one. I've heard nothing but good things on it and I cannot wait to start it. So yes, I think you can figure out pretty easily where the idea for this video came up. Both of these books I've been really anticipating reading. Since I will be reading They Never Learn as a part of the Game of Tomes readathon, I'll be getting that one done first. So I will give you guys an update when I've made some progress into it. Hey guys, so I have officially hit the halfway point into They Never Learn, and I'm really enjoying this book. We alternate back and forth between the perspective of Scarlett, who is a professor, and then also of Carly, who is a student. The both of them are very different. Scarlett is incredibly charismatic and definitely self-confident, whereas Carly clearly suffers from social anxiety. She has a very hard time making space for herself. Being in her head's a little frustrating for me, just because we are very different people, but I still think what's happening in Carly's perspective is really interesting in terms of how her life is at this changing point. She doesn't have a great relationship with her parents and doesn't have the best home life, and now she's out on her own and really being able to make these decisions for herself for the first time. She's just not used to this kind of freedom. She is also bisexual, which really cool. Didn't know that this had that rep in it. Love that. I think Scarlett is bisexual as well. Definitely can tell that there's a little bit of a romance element in Carly's perspective that I think will be developing as the story continues, but I'm not a big fan of it, in all honesty. I kind of want Carly to go with someone else. I'm being vague on purpose. I also love that right out of the gate, Scarlett is just so badass, so unapologetically a psychopath, and I'm really into it. I love seeing this perspective of a female serial killer. It's really interesting that she actually shifts her MO for every single one of her kills and changes the different sort of weapons that she uses, whether it's strangling or stabbing or poison. I just think that's very interesting in terms of how she's learned to adapt her killing style, so she is constantly being able to get away with it and turn her murders into something excusable, like an accident or suicide. It's really interesting. Scarlett also has I don't know if I can really call it a love interest, but she has someone in her own life who, again, I do not like this person. I do not trust this person. The chapters in this are pretty short. They read very quickly, and each of them always kind of ends on either a cliffhanger or some new reveal or something that's just enticing enough that you want to keep reading, which is part of why I've been reading this very quickly so far. One of the big things I heard about this book when going in was that it has lots of discussions on rape culture, and two of the main topics tying in with that I've really enjoyed how they've played out so far is discussing the boys club of academia, which always ensures that their own are moving forward and on top of everything. Along with that, though, is also the I don't know how to word this, excusability of athletes doing terrible things because they're athletes and they can bring a lot of money and notoriety to the college. So even though Scarlett is a serial killer and morally I can understand what she is doing is wrong, she's a revenge killer though. And so ethically speaking, she's also kind of in the right. It's a very weird book for that specific mindset, because it's like, I shouldn't be cheering you on, but I am cheering you on. There's also a twist that happens 40% in. I don't know if it's a twist. There's like this reveal that takes place that connects the two timelines, and I don't want to say anything about it, but the way it was handled was just very, very well done, because looking back, it's not shocking, but at the same time, like, oh my god, it was so well handled. The way it was laid out and how Fargo made certain things intentionally ambiguous so that you couldn't figure it out. Oh, I just think it was really clever in terms of writing. She did a great job with that. I don't know what else to say here other than I'm really enjoying this. I needed to make this update so I can officially continue reading it, because holy crap, this book. Hey y'all, so I have officially finished out They Never Learn, and this book was so freaking good. I understand all of the 5 stars and the praising reviews of it because I loved it. It was so great. Oh my gosh. I finally realized that this book really made me think of the 5th season of Dexter, specifically Lumen's story arc. With that being said though, I do think because I finally made that connection in my head, I realized that I sort of had a preconceived idea of what I thought Scarlett's background was going to be, which is possibly why the reveal that happens around like the 50% mark was all the more shocking to me, because it didn't line up with what I was expecting. Pretty certain I said in my first update that I was definitely preferring Scarlett's perspective over Carly's, but as the book progressed forward, I really just became so enthralled with each storyline. Oh my lord, I couldn't put the book down. I was just gobbling it all up. I really was so desperate to figure out what was the conclusion for each story going to be, and the characters around both stories are fascinating and also absolutely terrible people, which I think ties right in with the dark academia vibe going throughout this book, which, wow, those were really strong. The setting of this campus was so atmospheric. I could really visualize it. Reading this book definitely took me back to my own college campus. I think reading it in November was the perfect choice because the setting itself really came alive. I think Lane Fargo was very clever in how she laid this book out because the writing was just so addicting. She would always give you one little crumb at the end of each chapter in both perspectives that would make you desperate for more. The criticism of rape culture in this, I think, is well handled, and I appreciated how she tied in some other topics that go along with it, like the boys club of academia, and not just academia, but the boys club in many areas where it is currently male dominated. But I think she tied all of these things into this thriller very well, and the ending I had no idea how I wanted this to end. With that, I think is why I loved this book so much, because the entire time I could not get my footing in how I felt about these characters. I think that showcases how well they are characterized for the kind of people that they are. The ending for both storylines was, I don't know if I want to say satisfying, but I was very happy with them and they made perfect sense. Also, there was like one little element in Scarlett's that I guessed, but even with that, the rest of it was still perfect and I wouldn't have wanted it to end in any other way. One gripe I have about this book is we're told Scarlett has been killing people for many years now. She is a seasoned professional in being a serial killer. She has been very clever in covering up her crimes and changing her MO to constantly ensure that each of the deaths she's responsible for end up being dismissed as accidents or suicides or something else. With that, there's a few just little slips she makes that I had a hard time believing she wouldn't think to cover those up given how long she's been doing this. I guess you could argue she's been doing this for so long that she eventually is just getting sloppy, which is kind of what happens to serial killers in real life, and that's why they end up getting caught, is because they get sloppy and comfortable. I just didn't like that. It didn't make sense in terms of the logic that had been laid out for us the rest of the book. With that, my Call Pile breakdown put this baby at 4.5 stars, and I'm happy with that rating because, oh my god, this book was so good. This was a really great thriller. I'm definitely recommending this to people who enjoy thrillers, who love some literary criticism in their thrillers, and who really enjoy morally gray characters. I'm gonna be completely honest, I have no idea when I am going to pick up The Maidens. It might be a while before I update you. In reality, it's gonna be like a minute for you guys, but it's gonna be a while for me. Hey guys, so I know it hasn't really been a long time for you, but long time no see for me. So I have started into The Maidens. You can't see anything on this because the dust jacket's down here. I've started into The Maidens. I think I'm about 20% in currently. Already don't know how to feel about this book. I didn't really have any expectations about 𝗖cie viņš⁰ writing because I haven't read The Silent Patient, which everyone seems to praise a lot. Apart from the hype I've heard for his work, I didn't really know what to expect going into this, and thus far, I don't know if this has superseded my expectations or not. Our main character is Mariana, and this poor woman has 99 problems right out of the gate. She's a recently deceased husband. She has past familial issues. She has a niece that she's insanely protective of as a surrogate daughter. Pretty sure she kind of has a stalker patient, definitely dealing with some alcoholism, and now she's trying to solve a murder. All of that really gets dived into within first 20, maybe 30 pages of the book. I appreciate that we're getting a lot of depth from Mariana, and there's been a lot of development of her character and her background, but with that being said, I hate the way it's being handled. It kind of is like info dumping, but in backstory, not in world building. And I don't like info dumping. I want the background to be woven in seamlessly with the current events that are taking place. Have it come up when it makes sense. If there's a lull in whatever is happening around Mariana, then bam, that is the time for us to get 5 pages of backstory around her. And anytime it happens, I'm just like, what triggered this? How did we get here? And then whenever we inevitably go back to the actual current events, I completely forgot what was happening because we spent so much time looking at her backstory. It's just it's a weird way of writing in a thriller. I guess is just the thing I'm seeing right now, is because I've never seen this kind of writing and layout of a story done in a thriller I've read. On top of that, given the fact that she is not the detective in charge trying to solve the case, of course it seems like the cops are all just bumbling idiots who don't really take any additional leads seriously, and they just go with the one that seems the easiest right out of the gate. If you think about it, it doesn't actually make a lot of sense. So I'm not a big fan of that either, because it just doesn't seem realistic to me. I tend to enjoy watching police procedurals and watching the cops be the main characters, where they're the ones investigating the story who we're following along with. Seeing them treated like complete idiots, not a big fan of that. I don't think that's realistic. There's also been plenty of Greek tie-ins already. I wasn't really surprised about that because I did hear that this has a lot of like little nuances to Greek mythology within it, on top of the weird thing that happens with the professor that I haven't really even gotten into yet. I just know that the professor is kind of young and hot, and he's surrounded by a bunch of like 20-year-old girls, which creepy. Don't like that. So this is a little bit early for me to be trying to guess any kind of a rating, but thus far, I don't know how I'm gonna like the rest of this book. We're not off to a strong start, I'll put it that way, which is really unfortunate. I'll talk to you guys later, hopefully when I've gotten maybe like 50, I might just do like 75% in at this point. Who knows, actually I could also just finish the book. Maybe it'll hook me in, maybe I'll just end up blasting through the rest of it. That would be really great and I would love that. Hey y'all, so it has been exactly a day since I last updated you, and I have actually finished The Maidens by 𝗖cie viņš⁰, or should I say I've not finished it because I decided to DNF it at 40 pages before the end because I could not stand another second of being in Mariana's perspective. Oh my god, this woman drove me insane. She is incredibly paranoid, but paranoid in ways that it doesn't make sense. She's so careless in how she acts and often puts herself in dangerous situations, but that's not what she's paranoid about. She's paranoid about her husband's death and for some reason thinking that he was killed by a vengeful goddess that was Persephone. And I understood the Greek mythology line that she was following there, but it makes no sense. Why is that what you're paranoid about? You are literally investigating murder, and yet you're not paranoid about following potential suspects. You're not paranoid about being in close proximities with all these people alone. With that, because of her paranoia, there were many suspenseful scenes that I think the author was trying to utilize them to make the readers paranoid and showcase like her feelings were valid. The first one comes at a point where it seemed way too early. It didn't make sense in terms of the flow of the story. Mariana had barely started to investigate, and yet she's suddenly being followed by this mysterious person. It makes no sense. We've had barely any lead up in the investigation for her to really have made progress and for it to make sense that somebody is actually concerned she might find an answer and start following her. She also makes like a bunch of dumb jumps in logic that I just don't think really makes sense in terms of trying to solve the mystery. I think they make sense for trying to convince us that this professor is in fact the killer, but they seem like really big jumps. I mean, they're definitely unfortunate coincidences, but like reason enough to suspect the man of murder. You can definitely tell that Mariana was written by a man because she almost feels like a caricature of a woman grieving her husband's death. Like, I was not convinced by her grief, and all of the things that are explained to us just don't particularly feel like something a person actually grieving for a loved one would be feeling and experiencing. So that was really odd as well. On top of that, with her being a female character written by a man, it seemed like every single male character in this book either lusted after her, wanted to kill her, or both. I mean, really, that's a bit much, don't you think? There is a red herring in one of the male characters, and with that, it didn't even make sense as a red herring because it was glaringly obvious that we were supposed to be suspicious of this person. But if it had ended up being that person as the killer, it A, would have made absolutely no sense, but B, would have been way too obvious of a person to pick as the murderer. So I just don't even think it was necessary to do that. Like, you could have just completely not used a red herring and instead focused on revealing the actual twist of who it was. As I mentioned, many male characters show interest in Mariana romantically, one of them being this graduate student at the college. The entire romantic aspect of it felt so unnecessary. It was not needed in this, and I think it just added another layer to the plot that made everything feel way too busy. I ended up doing reading sprints with my friend last night and read like 150 pages of this, which was really great, and then this morning I was determined to try and finish it while I was eating breakfast. Mariana's perspective was driving me insane because she's constantly just going in and doing these stupid things to the point that I was like, you know what, I just don't care anymore. I don't even want to push through to find out who the killer is because Mariana was driving me insane that much, and I had to stop. I probably could have pushed through the last 40 pages if like maybe I had just taken a break then instead of officially DNFing it, but honestly, I don't want to expend any more time on this book. So rather than do that, I looked through some spoilery reviews on Goodreads to try and find what the actual answer was to see how I felt about it and to give you a bit of a review on that part. I actually guessed who the killer was pretty early on, but with that, I don't think there's really enough lead up in the actual story to think that person's the killer. I suspected them as kind of a one-off thought process, and then there's another twist that happens in there with that person that connects with Mariana, and I don't like that aspect of it. I'm not gonna go into it, but like, look up content warnings for this. This was a unfortunate turn of events. Had a 5-star and a DNF. Okay, so I don't really know how to officially wrap up this video because this was more of just a theme I saw that was ongoing between these two books. Yes, I think it was definitely better done in the first book. I do think the whole killer professor aspect was really interesting in The Maidens. I will say one thing that's really interesting is that in both of these books, the professors each had focuses in literature. The Maidens was Greek Greek literature, whereas They Never Learn was English. Apart from that, these were very different books, and I very much preferred They Never Learn. Alright guys, so that is it for today. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I have my Goodreads, Storygraph, Instagram, and Tumblr linked in the description if you're interested in keeping up with what I am reading. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!